Hey guys, Jason here with RWB NetSec, and I'm starting up this video series here that's going to focus on a pen testing career, the things that you're going to run across. I've had a lot of people from the YouTube channel who have said things like that they were going into pen testing. They're basically using my videos as tutorials, learning how to use the tools and things like that. So I thought it might be a good idea to create a series to kind of give you an idea of what a pen testing career looks like. Now, this first video of the series is not really a technical hands-on video like you're used to seeing. With this one, I'm just going to go over what to expect, the types of testing that you're going to do, things that you're going to see from a real-world perspective of what it's like to actually be a pen tester on a daily basis. This series is really going to be geared towards those who are just starting out, but hopefully anyone who watches will be able to learn something from it. It's one thing to learn how to use a tool, but it's another to know when to use that tool and how everything fits together when you're actually performing a pen test for a customer. So when you begin your pen testing career and you actually go out and start working with clients, you're going to quickly realize that no two tests that you perform are ever going to be the same. That's why it's important early on in your career, you need to develop a foundational skill set. And that's going to come through practice, taking classes, anything that you can get your hands on that will, further your education. And if I guess I've heard from some people who talk about how expensive maybe some classes are. I'll just say SANS, for example. I know SANS classes are very expensive, and maybe even in other countries. I've also heard that classes in other countries are pretty expensive too. That's the great thing about having access to the internet. There are tons and tons of free resources available for people. As long as you've got an internet connection, then you should have access to any topic that you want to learn about. So when it comes to an actual pen testing career, there are a couple of different scenarios that you may find yourself in. The first is where you're working on a security team for a company and you're performing internal pen tests. Maybe that company is developing internal web apps, and you might be part of a team that actually tests the security of those apps before they get put into production. That's one possible scenario. The second one is, and this is the one that I'll primarily be focusing on in this video, but it's where you go to work for a pen testing company as a consultant. So basically the pen test company itself is hired by other businesses to test the security of their networks, web apps, and possibly their users. So there are some major differences that I see between those two scenarios. So I'm going to kind of break it down based on what a typical job would look like for each one of those. If I can get the PowerPoint thing to work here. All right, so first is where you're working on just an internal security team for one company. Probably part of your daily job requirements is going to be that you're going to be doing some vulnerability scans, whether that's using Nessus or some other tool to do that. You may be testing internally developed web apps, like I said. I guess one of the downsides for this type of scenario is you're going to be looking at the same network all the time, every day. And that could get boring over time. You're going to be looking at the same systems, the same servers, the same firewall setups and everything every day, month after month. For me personally, I would not want to be in that kind of situation. Of course, I would if a door opened up and I had to do something like that. But to choose that type of career path is, for me personally, again, it's just not for me. I think I would get bored very quickly looking at the same stuff all the time. So the second scenario that I talked about was working as a pen testing consultant. With this one, like I said, no two client assessments that you do are ever going to be the same. You're going to be looking at a different network setup for every assessment that you do. I guess I kind of think that you need a broader skill set to work as a consultant, and you'll understand why as we get further on in this video. And one of the downsides to being a consultant is the time factor, because when a client hires your pen testing company to do an assessment, they only pay for a certain number of hours to perform that assessment. And most of the time it's going to be like maybe a week or two at the most. So you've really got to prioritize what you're looking at. You've got to make sure that the scope of the test is well defined. And that may take some tweaking and things as you get into the test between you and the customer. So I think that's probably for me the number one thing, is just being restricted on time. You know, the bad guys sit out there and they've got all the time in the world to sit and, you know, poke away at a network trying to find vulnerabilities to get into it. And you as a pen testing consultant, you're very limited in the time. So a lot of times you're not going to have enough time to sit and really do what I would consider an absolutely thorough test for the customer, just because of the time factor here. So from my experience, I'm going to list out here the types of testing that you will come across working as a consultant for a pen testing company. So you've got an external vulnerability assessment / pen test. You've got the internal assessment pen test, web application assessments, wireless security, firewall configuration reviews, social engineering, and compliance based, which would be mainly for PCI and HIPAA based compliance. And I'm just going to go through and talk about each one of these and kind of give a little bit of detail about what is included with each type of test and what some of the things that you'll run across with them. So the first and probably the easiest, I would say, or the smallest one there could be, for the external NVA / PT, and the NVA just stands for Network Vulnerability Assessment. So basically with this one, the customer will give you a range of external IP addresses, and then they want you to see if you can get to their internal network from the internet. For this assessment, the tools that you're normally going to be using will be things like Nessus and Nmap, just to kind of get, you'll run a Nessus scan, look for any low-hanging fruit as far as vulnerabilities go. You run Nmap to get a look at what ports and services are open, and then maybe some other miscellaneous tools just depending on what type of findings that you get from the scanners. From my experience on an external test, the types of devices that I run into most often would be things like firewalls. So I mainly see like Sonic walls and Cisco ASA devices. You're also going to find, of course, there's going to be web servers. Possibly there could be a file server if they've not configured something correctly. FTP servers and things like that. And honestly, most current companies do a pretty good job of securing their perimeter devices. Now, that's not to say that you still can't find flaws in them, but getting to an internal network now through an internet-facing device, it's just not as common as it used to be. The types of devices, like I said, you're going to see Sonic walls, maybe other vendors. Most of the time, these are going to have web interfaces. I mean, you could try to brute force to log into them, and there may be some vulnerabilities. One of the things that you're going to see as well, you may look, you may find a certain device and look up for any public exploits for it, and you may find some, but what I found is a lot of the exploits that are available are denial of service type exploits. And for a customer, that's just not something that you're going to want to run. You don't want to take down systems and cause an outage unless they specifically tell you that's okay, which I've never had that happen. I've never had a client tell me that, yeah, go ahead and take my stuff down if you can. That's a loss of business to them, loss of revenue, and that's something they certainly don't want to happen. One of the other things that I see is like a misconfigured FTP server, and maybe a development type box that wasn't necessarily meant to be accessible to the internet, but when the system administrator was setting it up, they accidentally exposed them to the internet and then forgot about them. So just a quick story here. I was performing an external assessment for a client, and I came across an FTP server that they had on the internet. And just by chance, it allowed anonymous logins to the server. So I log into this FTP server and kind of look around to see what was there. And I found out that people had been using it to store malware and other types of files. And the thing was, when I told the customer about it, they weren't even aware that the FTP server was there. One of their former administrators had set this thing up, and I guess nobody ever knew about it. It wasn't documented or whatever reason. And some of the files that I found on there had been there for at least 3 years, and nobody at the customer site knew it even existed. Those kinds of things are, I would consider them rare, but you will see stuff like that from time to time. So the next type of test we'll look at is the internal NVAPT. So with the internal test, you're going to have a lot more clients to go after. And it could be up in the hundreds, just depending on the scope of your test. So in comparison with an external test, most of the time you're only going to have a handful of targets to go after. But the methodology that you use between the two is pretty much going to be the same, at least at the foundational level. So with an internal, you're going to fire up Nessus or whatever your preferred vulnerability scanner is. Run Nmap scans against your target range. One thing that you will find occasionally is the client may limit you on the types of tools that you can use or the types of scans. They may not want you to run anything that is considered aggressive on their network, just by the off chance that it takes something down. So just remember that, and make sure that you have all this hashed out with your client before you actually begin the test. Normally with an internal test, you're going to find that there are a greater number of vulnerabilities to go after. And it's something like this. It could actually be pretty overwhelming at first. And this is where you need to learn to prioritize your targets. Of course, this is going to be driven by the scope of the test and what the goals are that the client has for this portion of the test. It may be that they want to see if you can get access to certain types of data, or if you can get maybe domain admin access. So the customer's goals are what's going to drive the things that you focus on. And again, this is going to be mainly because of the time limits imposed. You may be scanning 100 machines internally and have tons and tons of vulnerabilities to go after. But just because you're limited with the amount of time you have for testing That's going to cause you to have to prioritize the targets and really narrow it down as far as what you go after. I have not been on a test yet where the customer has just paid for an unlimited amount of time and said, go at it, do what you want, take as long as you want. That just doesn't happen. And most of the time that's driven by what their budget is for their testing. Most of the time with these internal tests, if you can get domain admin where you've got full access to their Active Directory structure, that's going to be more than enough to show impact to the customer. If you take a screenshot of the CEO's Outlook email, that's just kind of a bonus. And it's not that you're trying to be a troll and say, hey, look what I got. But something like that is something that you can give to management that will really help them to understand. If you hand a non-technical person a report and all it's got is, Nmap scans, all this other technical stuff, and they're not going to have a clue what you're talking about. They're not going to know, what the report is, and basically it's worthless to them. So you just have to remember that when you do your report, that it's going to be looked at by more than just an IT person. It's likely going to be reviewed by management from other business groups within that company. So make sure that you explain everything in terminology that they understand as well. And as part of this series, I will be doing a video specifically on reporting. So we'll go over this more in detail for that part of the series. So the next type of test that you'll run across is a web app assessment. More often than not with these, you're not going to be performing like a full code review for the application. It usually starts again with you running a vulnerability scanner against the application, and that would be using a tool like maybe NetSparker or Acunetics. I also like to use Burp Suite Pro in it and use its scanning feature. Sometimes I've found that Burp will pull up vulnerabilities that the other scanners don't find, so it's always good to have more than one tool if possible, just to verify, and you can compare the results that each one of them gives you. The other thing too, and I want to stress this, whether you're doing web apps or the external or internal scans, don't just rely on the scanner's output for your findings. You need to be able to manually test what the scanner has given to you. So, for example, if you're running NetSparker and it comes back and tells you that there is a SQL injection or cross-site scripting, you need to be able to go back and manually verify that that vulnerability exists. Because it is possible that there could be false positives that come back with these things. And you never want to get in the habit of just running a scanner, printing its output, and handing it out to the client as a report. That's not a pen test. That's just a vulnerability assessment. And in my opinion, you're wasting the customer's time. If they're paying you for a pen test and that's all you're giving to them, it's not worth it to them. You've just wasted their time and money. The other thing with web app assessments, oftentimes you're going to be performing in two types of scenarios by an authenticated user and an unauthenticated user. If you're doing an authenticated assessment, see if the client will give you just a standard user account and an admin account. And that way you can compare what you see when you log in with each one. As far as just say you log in with a standard user account, you want to see if you can elevate your privileges and get access maybe to some of the administrative functions that a normal user shouldn't be able to get to. That's just another part of the testing that you'll be doing with a web app assessment. And guys, I hope I'm not going too fast through this stuff. I'm really trying to make the video to where it's not super long, because I know this is PowerPoint and people tend to get bored quickly. So, but I hope that I'm still able to give you good information with this. So let's move on to the next type of test that you will come across will be doing a wireless assessment. So there are going to be a couple of goals for this type of testing. One may be to test the security of the access points themselves. So you want to see if you can get access to the access point either through maybe default admin passwords that they've left on the device, or by cracking passwords when you capture handshakes between the clients and the access points. A lot of times you're going to see there will be a public and a private network set up. So another part of the test may be that you want to see if you can get access to the private network from the public network. Another thing that you're going to look at is the client may ask you to find or to see if you can find any rogue access points that are on their network. Maybe they've got an employee who just brings in a Linksys device that they bought from Walmart because they wanted to have wireless for whatever reason in their office. So they just bring it in and plug it up on your corporate network and don't tell anybody, and then they don't do anything to secure it. So you'll want to look for things like that while you're doing your wireless assessment. Now, some of the tools that you'll be using for wireless are going to be things like the aircrack-ng suite, Wi-Fi, and Kismet. Those are probably the top three that I use. I normally would start off just by firing up Kismet just to get an overview of the wireless devices that I see in the area. And then from there, once I get a good idea of that, I'll move over. Now, I have used Wi-Fi quite a bit, and that Wi-Fi actually does a pretty good job of automating a lot of the processes for you as far as being able to scan for the available access points, and then you can take what it finds and tell it that you want to try to do a DAuth attack or something like that. The Wi-Fi does make it easy in that respect. However, I found that Wi-Fi seems to run a little bit slow at times. So my preferred wireless assessment software is probably going to be the aircrack-ng suite. So using things like aircrack, AeroDump, Airmon, that whole suite of tools is excellent. And at some point I may actually sit down and do a tutorial series on those as well. So you're going to be doing things like, let's just say you're going to crack a password. So you're going to want to, you're going to be sniffing network traffic. So one thing you're going to want to make sure that you do have is a good wireless adapter. And you can see here I've got a picture of an alpha device. Make sure that you get one that can scan all the wireless networks. So like A, B, G, and N at a minimum is what you want it to be able to do. And you want, with the drivers that run that device, you want those to be able to support packet injection. And the alpha cards have been very good. I've got several of them myself that I use. I've never had any issues with them. And if you're using Kali Linux to do your assessment, it already has the drivers built into it for the alpha cards. So it's pretty much just to plug in the device, Kali sees it, and then you can fire up your aircrack suite or Wi-Fi or any of the other tools. Oop, getting ahead of myself here. So like I was saying, as far as like cracking passwords and things, you're going to be capturing handshakes. And just be prepared to and understand that you're going to be spending quite a bit of time. This is not something that you're going to sit down, at least most of the time, and spend 10 or 15 minutes on a wireless assessment and be finished. I've never had one that has only taken that long. Normally, you're going to be on a network that's very noisy. It could be that your client is located inside of a building with other companies who also have wireless networks running. So you're going to have to sift through the access points that you're seeing and all the wireless clients and be able to focus it down on your target's devices themselves so that you're not attacking another company's wireless network. And then once you do capture the handshakes, then you're going to spend more time trying to actually crack the password to get the pre-shared key. For that, I use aircrack, which seems to work pretty well, and it's actually pretty fast. But fast still means that it's going to take a long time, depending on, of course, it depends on the hardware that you're using as far as what type of computer you have, and also the word list and things that you feed to the cracking software. There may be another thing that you come across. Sometimes clients will request this, but they want you to map out where you see access points. And it is possible that you can use a GPS device with Kismet. That's one of the reasons why I would use Kismet, is just for the GPS capabilities. So you can be sniffing the network traffic with Kismet. The GPS device will take those coordinates because Kismet will capture the coordinates for it. And then you can take all that and then print it out on a map that shows the locations. The only problem with this is it's not an exact science as far as the way it maps things out. So you're not going to get down to, this is exactly where this access point sits, but you can generally get pretty close to where it is. But like I said, I don't have a lot of clients who actually ask for GPS mapping of access points, but I have run across it a couple of times. So the next type of test that we will look at, and I don't know if it's so much of a test, but to do a firewall configuration review, this is probably my least favorite type out of all of these, just because it at least to me, it's not very exciting. Basically what happens is the client will give you a copy of their configuration file for their firewall. And then you're supposed to go through it, look at all the rules that they have set up, look to make sure that they're not just overly permissive rules. You may be checking the device to see if it has weak SNMP community strings. And for this, most of the time, we use a tool called Nipper Studio. So Nipper will take that firewall device configuration and actually process everything through it. And it will also check for that SNMP community string. Nipper is a good tool. It gives you a good report output, and then you can sit and go through that report. It also classifies any findings, based up on if it's a critical or a medium or low, things like that. So it does make it easy to go through, but Nipper is a commercial tool, so you will have to spend money if you find that you're going to have to do these things. I don't have to do a lot of these, but they do come up from time to time. So the next type of test that we're going to look at is going to be the social engineering. And depending on your engagement, this can actually be a fun part of any assessment that you do. So basically with social engineering, there are 4 main types of social engineering attacks, at least that I'm familiar with. There may be others out there, but these are the 4 main ones that I see regularly. You have a pretexting attack, phishing, baiting, and physical access. Now for pretexting and phishing, the client may actually give you a list of targets already that they already have defined, or the other option would be that they may tell you to go out on your own, do your own recon, see what you can find on the internet, see what users you can come up with, and then you give them the list that you've put together. They can verify whether those people actually still work for the company. And then once you get the finalized list, then you can start your attacks. So with pretexting, this is where you actually call a target user. And the goal is, at least most of the time, you're trying to get them to give you sensitive information, such as, maybe their login credentials. So it may be that you just try to get them to give those to you over the phone, or you try to direct them maybe to a website that you've got set up, where you want them to enter their username and password to try to log in. And of course, since you control the website, you're capturing this data as they enter it, and the user doesn't realize what's going on until it's too late. So phishing is probably the easiest part of this to carry out. Again, you get your target list of email addresses, and you basically send the email out. You craft an email, and make sure, if you're doing this, make the email look legit. Don't just halfway throw something together and expect it to get the users. It may work for some people, but a lot of people have at least had some basic kind of security awareness training. And if they say something that's got, misspelled words in it, grammar mistakes, those kinds of things are going to throw red flags up to most people anyway. But with phishing, I would say with phishing and pretexting, you need to do a lot of homework. And by this, I mean open source intelligence gathering is very critical to being successful with social engineering. So you're going to be visiting sites like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, any social media site that user may be on, may have posted something to. You're going to gather as much information about that person as you can before you ever make a phone call or send those emails out. And, don't forget the company's own website, because a lot of times they're going to have email addresses on there. And if you can look at what an email address looks like, you can get the naming scheme for the company. So, if you're out on the internet doing your recon and you're not really finding a lot of email addresses, but you're finding names of employees, if you can find out what the naming scheme is for their email addresses, then it's pretty easy at that point to put a list together. Now, baiting is normally taking like a USB thumb drive and dropping it in strategic locations around the company. So you're wanting to see with this if users will pick up the thumb drive and then take it back to their computer and plug it in. Most of the time, the attacker is going to have, you may put like a malicious Word document on there and name it something like user salaries or something like that. And you're hoping that the user is going to click on that and open it up. And you can set these things, the payloads, to actually send a reverse shell back out to you from that user's computer. And now you've got access to an internal machine just because they clicked on a malicious Word document. And baiting like this actually works more often than you might think, because people are just curious by nature. If somebody sees a file called salary, they're going to try to open it just to see what's in it. And then the last part of social engineering is the physical assessment. And this is going to be where you actually try to gain access into a building, to an office complex, or maybe a restricted area of some kind. And to do this, it might require you to become a pretty good actor. You need to be able to think quickly, depending on what situation you find yourself in. So you may try things like tailgating other employees as they enter the building, or maybe trying to social engineer the receptionist when you come in and see if she will give you access into a restricted space. Another thing with the physical assessment, you may actually just want to sit and observe what goes on at the business. So this may mean, go sit in the parking lot for a couple of days, if it's accessible. Don't try not to look too suspicious. But if you can sit in the parking lot, watch how employees come and go to the business. Keep track of, does everybody leave at a certain time of day to go to lunch? Does everybody take a break at the same time? Do they all kind of congregate? Maybe there's like an outdoor smoking area or something that a lot of people go to a few times a day. And sometimes now, of course, I'm not suggesting that you start smoking, but if you do smoke, you can go hang out with the smoking crew, as I call it. And it's possible just by doing that you could come up with, tell them that you're a new employee, yada, yada, yada. And then when they all go back inside the building, you just follow them right on in. It's just another way. You have to, usually with physical access, you need to be pretty creative and make sure that you've got your story together. And make sure that you have access to your site contact just in case something goes wrong. If they have security at the building and you're trying to get into an area that you're not supposed to be, and then security, of course, they should stop you, but you want to make sure that you have that your site contact knows what's going on, and that you have a way of escape if necessary. So the last type of testing that I'm going to touch on here is going to be compliance-based testing. And more often than not, this is just going to be for PCI compliance. You're going to see this a lot if you're testing like retail type businesses and generally anybody that's processing credit card data. Segmentation testing is a pretty big part of this. And that's basically just where you can see, where you see if you can access the PCI network from the standard network. If you can cross that boundary, then that's instant fail as far as the assessment goes for them. You're more than likely, you're going to be working with the QSA, which is the a PCI qualified security assessor. They are usually the ones that determine the actual scope of the test. They work with the clients for the PCI scope, and they are responsible for verifying that the client is compliant with PCI standards. Once the test is complete, then the QSA will issue what's called a ROC for the client, and that basically just says that the client is compliant with PCI standards and that they can continue processing card data. This is an area that I myself, I'm not an expert on, but I just wanted to give you kind of a general idea of what is required here. So that's it, guys. I'm going to wrap it up for this video, and I hope everybody hasn't fallen asleep by now. I know this wasn't a super exciting video, but I wanted to kind of give at least for everybody who is thinking about becoming a pen tester, or maybe you've already started on that path, but you haven't actually started working in that environment yet. I just wanted to kind of give you a real world view of what to expect when you go to work for a pen testing company as a consultant. For me personally, I love working as a pen tester. So anytime that I can learn something new, I want to be able to share that with everybody else and my experiences. You know, if I come across a unique situation or something that helps me on a test, then I will be glad to share that knowledge, those techniques out with everybody. And I think most people out in the community do the same thing. So if you guys have any questions or comments, just leave them down below. And if some of you are listening who already work as pen testers, and you've got maybe some tips and tricks that you want to share, maybe correct if I got something wrong in the video, leave a correction. I'm more than willing to take constructive feedback. So just leave feedback. Let me know what you think. And as always, guys, I really appreciate the support you guys have given me on this channel. I know I haven't posted as much as I wanted to. Honestly, over the last month and a half or so, I've just been absolutely covered up with work, and I haven't had time to focus on videos. So I hope soon to get back into at least somewhat consistent, at least maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, that I can throw a video out there. So again, thank you all for watching. And as always, guys, I hope you have an awesome day. Talk to you later. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If it's your first time here, I would love if you subscribe to the channel and share it out with all of your friends. So my hope is to build a community where we can help each other learn and grow in security, especially if you're just getting into it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And again, thanks for watching. I hope you all have an awesome day. See you guys.